morning, everybody. Today we shall be talking about a new ism called as post-structuralism. Structuralism developed a model of reading texts and cultural artifacts. It was a rigorous and thorough textual analysis that paid close attention to language and form. It was also rather very formulaic. The attempt in structuralism was to seek an order, a structure to novels, menus, poetry, music, visual texts, and in fact everything. It sought grids and patterns, schemes and plots, always assuming that the text would yield its meaning once we arrive at the core elements of it. Whereas post structuralism was the expression of a sense of disillusionment with a nation state, with philosophies of emancipation, and with critical thinking itself. It emerged as a rupture. This word is very important, as a rupture, a shift away from what the prominent thinkers saw as the formulaic, ordered work of structuralism. Post structuralism thus has close contiguities, both thematic and contextual, with postmodernism. If we look at the basic assumptions of a structuralist model, it believes in the fact that reality is available only through language. Language and meaning are the product of differences. In fact, as we saw, it lies in the opposite. A systematic analysis enables one to understand truth and meaning. And they always believed that there is togetherness and oneness, and this can be achieved by moving towards the center. So they believed, structuralists believed, that every individual genre has got a center, and the most important thing is to look at the center in order to arrive at one meaning. Whereas post structuralism, with post hyphen structuralism, as you could see on the slide, means continuation of structuralism. Something that is in continuation to structuralism is called post hyphen structuralism. If we don't put hyphen, it is post structuralism together, which aims at expressing the cancellation of whatever structuralism presents. So without hyphen, it is a cancellation. With hyphen, it is a continuation. The post structuralism that we are discussing is both a continuation of structuralism, because chronologically, structuralism ke baad we get post structuralism. And also, it is a cancellation because whatever the structuralism presents, the post structuralism negates. So it's better that we write post structuralism without a hyphen and continuation. Post structuralism accepts the notion of structuralism like signifier, signified, arbitrary, and so on. But once formed, the signifier becomes totality, inseparable, and unified for structuralists. Whereas post structuralism believes in the indeterminacy of meaning. Meanings are never graspable. The moment we start reading a text, we feel that we are getting the meaning, but if we read the same text again, we get a different meaning. Some 10 years later, the meaning will be different. 100 years later, still the meaning will be different, whereas the text remains the same. So, post structuralism aims at multiplicity of meanings because one meaning is never graspable from a text. A word where there are no fixed meanings or stable point of reference is what post-structuralism talks about. That's why they say that we live in a decentered world where there is no center at all. We don't know where the center itself is. And so once the center is not determined, we can get many number of meanings. If the center is at 0 degrees, the meaning is different. 50, the meaning is different. 100, the meaning is still different, and so on. When we talk about the background and origin of post-structuralism, the very first name that comes to our mind is Roland Barthes, who actually started as a structuralist but ended as a post-structuralist. His publication of the work Death of the Author is the first text to talk about the post-structuralism. As he says, it is a methodology and assumptions where all texts are interconnected in an unending chain. The death of the author actually is responsible for the birth of the reader. as long as you are giving the importance to the author, and the author says that, the author opines that, the author's point of view is that, if this is our thinking, then you get a single meaning. But where there is no author, every reader who reads the text is the center, and you get a different meaning from it. Thereby, it talks about the death of the author and the birth of the reader with multiplicity of interpretations. There is no definite margin or center to a text, and every text is a weave of many other texts, according to Roland Barthes. The next important person who is responsible for putting about post-structuralistic notion is Jacques Derrida, who has put forward his notion of deconstruction. He questions the notions of unity, identity, truth, and asserts that there are no centers at all anywhere. The entire language itself begins with phonocentrism, that believes that it is sound that is prior to words. Derrida argues phonocentrism doesn't exist because even before we go into the sounds, the pre-speech level has got an undefined language within the mind, and that becomes the center. The sounds are not the centers. You have something like the pre-speech level also. So phonocentrism is negated. The entire language begins with the center of words, which we called as logocentrism. Logos is words. So words are the center, and the most important thing is to go into the word and find out the actual meaning that the word has. Derrida argues that words are not the center at all, because words have different meanings in different contexts, and as a result of which, in different times and in different spaces, in different cultures and in different countries, the same word might mean different. So words are not the center. Logocentrism is negated. The entire society believes that man is in the center and it is he that gives the meaning to the text or the expression. Derrida negates man to be at the center, and he therefore negates the phallocentrism. So feminism comes into existence. The woman as the center, maybe the third gender or the transgender being the center comes into the existence and negates the existence of man in the center. So Derrida negates phallocentrism. The next center that we have in the world for understanding is Eurocentrism, where it is believed that Europe is in the center. So whatever is European is supposed to be the standard, and whatever is non-European is supposed to be the non-standard. So English is standard, Christianity is standard, and so on and so forth, because English is the language of Europe, Christianity is the religion of Europe. Now, Derrida has negated this Eurocentric concepts, and he has brought about all the petite voices or the small voices, voices from India, voices from Africa, voices from Aboriginal Australia, voices from the New Americans, and so on has come into existence, thereby replacing the European voice. So Derrida has negated Eurocentrism as well. The next concept in which the entire world believes is theocentrism, where God is in the center. And Derrida have brought about a negation to God is in the center also. And he starts supporting man to be in the center. Not even man, but a woman to be in the center. Not even a woman, a child to be in the center. Not even a child, maybe a transgender to be in the center. Not even the words, maybe the meanings of the words in different contexts to be the center. Not even the sounds, but the pre-speech level to be the center. So basically, Derrida argues that there are no centers at all. We get one meaning from a text when we have all these centers. Phonocentrism, where sound is in the center. Logocentrism, where word is in the center. Phallocentrism, where man is in the center. Eurocentrism, where Europe is in the center. And theocentrism, where God is in the center. When we don't have center at all, then you don't have one meaning. You have multiplicity of meanings, which is what exactly post-structuralism is. Whereas structuralism ends with one meaning, post-structuralism has got many meanings to the text. The American Academy adopted Derrida's deconstructive ways of not having a center, and accordingly we have a host of critics like Paul Deman, Jeffrey Hartman, Hillis Miller, Harold Bloom, Barbara Johnson, who has combined deconstruction with Marxism, Gayatri Spivak, who has combined Marxism and feminism, and then we have Giles Deleuze talking about schizophrenia, and Felix Guattari talking about schizophrenia. So the general assumptions of post-structuralism is that it involves a closed textual analysis. It reveals the contradictions in the text. As far as closed textual analysis is, it is almost like structuralism. But the moment we have the contradictions within the same text, it becomes post-structural. The apparent unity is undermined by the post-structuralists, and the hidden text or the subtext is brought to the surface. As a result, they analyze the binary oppositions that we have see in man and woman, inside outside, black and white, upper caste and lower caste, upper class and lower class, and so on and so forth, as the structuralists do. But what is important in post structuralism is the suppressed term of hierarchy is exposed. Deconstruction displaces both the suppressed and the suppressor. The marginal or minority voices are brought about. So essentially, post-structuralism is a dissential. This word is very important. Dissential is no one meaning, no dominative meaning, and a subversive philosophy. Subversive is ulta karna. So it always tends to think of top-sided, ulta. So it is not man, but from a woman point of view. It is not an upper caste, but a lower caste point of view. It is not a white, but the black point of view. It is not the sound, but the pre-speech point of view. Do you understand? So it is a dissential and subversive philosophy to come out with multiplicity of meanings. Derrida says there is nothing outside a text. All reality, all identity, the entire history is available only through the text, that is, within the language. Language itself is never stable for Derrida. Meaning is never present in a sign as the sign itself keeps on changing and it refers to yet another sign. So Derrida argues a signifier has a trace or other signifiers along with it. Meaning is never fully graspable from any text. The final meaning is always postponed, and a sign is produced by time and place. Hence, its meaning is different at each time and each place. That's why we have multiplicity of meanings. Hence, we have the intertextuality and the intratextuality also. Intertextuality is a connection between more than one texts. And intratextuality is the connections that we find within the texts through the language. A text is in the multiple dimension of a space. So a text is not individual, but it is always intertextual and intertextual. Hence, a work of art, as the post-structuralists argue, becomes just a text. It is no more a work of art, but it becomes a text. An author who authoritatively says something in the text becomes just a writer. So a work becomes a text, later it becomes a document, it becomes an écriture in the French language, and in general it becomes a writing in general. So a text is no more a text. A work of art is no more a work of art, and an author doesn't exist at all. It is in this sense that Roland Barthes says the death of the author and the disappearance of a work of art. Rather, it is just a document in the hand of the reader. Whatever the reader interprets by the dissential way of reading, by the subversive way of reading, that becomes the meaning at that particular point of time and space. You can have many number of meanings also from the same text for different writers, for different readers, for different critics. So, post-structuralism is a dissential and subversive philosophy where good is not necessarily good, evil is not necessarily evil, truth is not necessarily truth. Evil must be celebrated and madness must be celebrated according to the post-structuralists. So, Ravana is not necessarily an evil person. Saturn is not necessarily an evil person. Rather, the same text of Ramayana or Mahabharata or even the Paradise Lost of John Milton is to be revisited with a different perspective. So the hero need not necessarily be heroic, a villain need not necessarily be a villain, but you can have a subversive reading of the same text as well. Very interesting, isn't it? The key thinkers being Roland Barthes with The Death of the Author, Jacques Derrida with The Structure, Sign and Free Play, Paul Leman, who argues that language is always figurative and reading is always a misreading, Jeffrey Hartman, who talks about the unlimited free play and the death of the subject, Hillis Marner, who talks about all signs, rhetorical figures, and language is highly fictive, and Michel Foucault, who brings about a system that has exclusion and marginalization in law and society. He talks about sexuality, crime, and punishment in the society. Jacques Lacan, a psychoanalyst who brings about the psychoanalysis into this subversive reading of the text. Gilles Deleuze, who talks about schizophrenia, and Felix Guattari, who talks about schizophrenia. We shall talk about all these great post-structuralist critics individually in the next videos to come. That's all for today to understand what post-structuralism is. Bye for now.